My name's Tim. I'm an alcoholic. I am presently feeling so relaxed. I certainly don't have an axe to grind today. At least not yet. The night is young, so who knows what's going to come out. If you're new in AA, and I think the first couple of years count as new, you're very welcome, and I hope you stay. In order not to die of alcoholism, I've had to do a couple of things. First of all, come back very, very regularly to AA meetings, whether I want to or not, and whatever I think about it. I'll come back to that question momentarily. And secondly, I've had to do what AA suggests. It's not what any particular person tells me to do, it is simply what the AA program suggests. A little while ago, someone expressed the idea that they didn't know where the tools of the program were. So there was a question about the tools of the program, and the line is used in the big book, the tools of the program. Spiritual tools, spiritual toolkit it talks about, I think on page 25, if I'm not mistaken. They said that they'd looked up online on the internet what the tools were and got conflicting answers. And I'm going to settle this once and for all. If the tool, the attitude or the procedure, the attitude or the operation is written out in the big book, anywhere up to page 164, you can rely on it as a tool of the AA program. Anything else might be very good. But I stick chiefly to the big book. I glance at other bits of AA literature. Some bits I find more useful than others. So that's the tools of the program, and they're available for everyone to read. If you can't get a copy, you can go and read it on the AA website for free. Won't charge you anything. No one making any money here. So all I have to do is keep coming back and do what the program suggests. Now that sounds straightforward, doesn't it? I don't think it is straightforward. I'm going to say something before I come back to those 2 points about my alcoholism. My alcoholism is actually the straightforward bit. The recovery is not so straightforward. My alcoholism is very straightforward. When I drink massive quantities. Now, every drink I ever had seemed like a terribly good idea at the time. Afterwards, I changed my mind. I would wake up every morning wishing I had drunk less, wishing I had not done the things that I had done. This is what a lawyer would call prima facie evidence that I was not acting in accordance with my true will. Just because something in the moment seemed like a good idea does not mean it is my will. Because with alcohol and with other things, I would be hijacked by an impulse, and the impulse would drive my action and convince me that I was doing precisely what I want, but regret the next day. That gives me evidence that there's something amiss. Planning as well. I would plan to get drunk, fair enough. But I never planned to get so drunk I would embarrass myself, have a rotten time, go to very dark places, both psychologically and indeed physically. Those were not the plans. When I act out of accordance with my plans, when after the event I regret what I have done, I was not acting in accordance with my will, I was acting under compulsion. And the compulsion the mechanism of compulsion will convince me in the moment that I'm doing what I want. I'm not doing what I want. I'm doing when I drink, I'm doing what my alcoholism wants. It is drinking through me. It is using me to drink. My problem with my alcoholism is twofold. I know in some circles it's three. I prefer two. Slightly simpler. When I drink way too much, so I should never have a drink, and yet I do. There we go. Two problems. I've been instructed by AA, and it's consistent with my experience, that the problem after the first drink is chiefly physical. In that, I would drink way too much, regardless of emotion, regardless of circumstances, regardless of intention, regardless of immediate consequences. I would be sometimes quite relaxed about the idea of a drink. I wouldn't particularly want to get drunk, but I would have one drink and I'd be off to the races. There was a sudden change when I had the first drink. And it's rather like fire. There can be 100 reasons why the fire starts. Once it starts, the way the fire propagates is the same. The second flame is caused by the third. The second flame is caused by the first, the third by the second, the fourth by the third. Regardless of how it started, regardless of why it started, once it starts, fire is fire. And that's my drinking. I was not someone that had made concerted and reasonable efforts over many years to stop drinking. I know some alcoholics have. They've been in and out of AA for years, in and out of treatment for years, seeing doctors and acupuncturists and whatever else. I'd never really given it a go. And when it said in the big book, we're people that cannot stop drinking even when we really tried, there were some attempts, but had I really tried? I mean, really no. I'd not gone to any lengths before AA to get sober. And I was left with a very difficult question. Well, how do I know I couldn't stop if I had really tried? How do I know I really do need AA? If one has tried for years, one has very good evidence. If one hasn't tried, well, how would one know? And it's very simple. I had years of consequences which upset me and which I linked very directly and clearly to my drinking. In particular, the inability to perform during the day in activities that were important to me. If I could have done something about it, I would have. But the fact is I didn't. That's all I need to know. There have been plenty of things in my life where I've had a bad experience and acted on that experience promptly and never looked back. You go on a terrible date with a terrible person and you have a horrible time and you delete the number, or back in the day it was you tear up the number. I was perfectly capable of having a bad experience and adjusting my behaviour on the basis of it, and there are many other good examples. I was forced to play rugby, I hated it, and as soon as I had the chance not to play rugby, I stopped playing rugby. If I could have stopped drinking on my own, I would have. The fact I didn't even give it a reasonable try is probably even better evidence that I cannot stop on my own than trying and failing. I didn't even have I knew what I was up against. I resigned myself at a very young age to being an alcoholic. I thought, if that's what I am, I must accept it. There we go. And so those are the two problems I was left with when I joined AA. When I drink way too much, leave me to my own devices and I will have a drink. Now, there's nothing AA can do about the quantity that I drink when I drink. The line in the big book, which is apropos, as they say, is this. The only relief we have to suggest is entire abstinence. And that's a tall order. That means forever. That means I mustn't make a mistake. Now, I don't know about you, I make plenty of mistakes. I've made some mistakes today. My sustained recovery absolutely can't be dependent on my perfect adherence. There's got to be something else protecting me. If I could be relied on for perfection, and abstinence for the rest of one's life is a form of perfection. If I could be relied on for that perfection, then there would be plenty of evidence of that perfection in the rest of my life. There is none. This is a very good sign I need a power greater than myself, that I will not be able to do this on my own. So the two things I've had to do and continue to have to do is keep going to AA regardless, and then do what AA suggests. I'll cover the first point, keeping going to AA. I don't know if you've noticed, but AA is full of alcoholics, and I'm not straightforward as an alcoholic. Other alcoholics are not straightforward. There was I better not say the place, but there was a city somewhere. Well, the city is still there, but the story is from a while ago, where there were two competing websites for AA in that city, with the same elements, AA in the name of the city, .org or whatever, but with the parts reversed, so almost mirror images of each other. So two websites, and each group in the city adhered very strongly to one of the two websites. There had been the most frightful arguments for many years, and this competing website was set up. And I was talking to a member, an American who lived in this city, which was in Europe. I talked to him about this. He was about 20 years sober, and he leaned in and he said, if you can stay sober in AA, you can stay sober anywhere. I thought that was very good. Staying in AA can be very challenging. Being in a group, particularly a physical face-to-face group, can be very challenging. It can seem at times boring and pointless and more trouble than it's worth. As one works the program and acquires a life and interests, those interests, that life can start to acquire a greater significance in one's mind than the program and the other people in AA. I can't tell you how many people I've known in AA. It's many thousands. I've been sober since the 24th of July 1993. Let's just put that on the record. I've known many thousands of people, and there's a curious observation. Surprisingly few of the people who got sober in 1993 or were already sober by 1993, surprisingly few do I see around. Now, I live in relatively central London, and that is a factor. People retire and leave London. Many people, when they retire, leave London. A lot of people, when they have children, move out to the suburbs, away from the little cramped inner city flats and out to the suburbs. It's a transient city. There are always people coming and going, very large influxes of people, very large outfluxes of people. People get sober, people get well, people get job offers in all sorts of extraordinary places. There are lots of very good reasons, and people die of old age. There are lots of very good reasons why lots of the people I knew when I got sober are not still here. And very many of them I know died sober or are now happily living elsewhere or are happily, in particular in the country, around the west of England is where a lot of Londoners end up, and they're doing very well, thank you. But by golly, that does not account for the lion's share of the people I've known. Alcoholism is playing an extraordinarily long game and is capable of picking people off at any point along the path. I heard someone say a few weeks ago, and I understood what he meant, but it was very interesting to me. He said, talking about putting space between the alcoholic and the drinking, and talking about a treatment centre being very good for that. So 6 weeks, 3 months, 6 months, whatever, you can put some space between you and the alcohol. And perhaps I shouldn't have, but I felt the need to point out that space between me and drinking does not protect me. Length of sobriety. My friend Devinder put it very well. He said, continuous sobriety does not keep you sober. The fact of having been sober for days, weeks, months, or years is not itself a protection. It may be indicative that the protection is in place, but it's not conclusive. If it were conclusive, everyone that stays sober for a year would stay sober forever, but they don't. And sometimes to stay in AA, I've had to really hold on to my chair and say, right, I'm going to stick this out and learn what needs to be learned in order for me to stay and be comfortable and happy and feel part of, and all of those other wonderful things. It is wonderful, but it's not without challenge. And another part of that, I was told when I was new to structure my life around AA. And none of your careers advisors on LinkedIn will suggest that, will they? It goes very much against what is referred to as the wisdom of the world. But I don't much care for the wisdom of the world. I care for the wisdom of AA. I found it much more useful and profitable. So I have the meetings I go to. I like face-to-face meetings. There's a need and a legitimate purpose of online meetings. I like face-to-face meetings. I do a meditation meeting every morning with a number of people online, 20 minutes, 7 a.m. Little bit of big book, little bit of something else, little bit of silence, little bit of sharing. 20 minutes sets me up for the day. It's one of the instructions in the big book. Join others in morning meditation. And I didn't do that for the first 26 years of my recovery. I started doing it and I discovered that yet another instruction in the big book was very, very profitable in lots of different ways. I sponsor a lot of people. I have contact with between 20 and 30 people in AA every day, in the capacity of sponsor to a large extent, but also I take calls and questions and so on, and I have my own questions, not very often, but I do have them, and little things I need to share. So I'm very tied into AA, and I'll tell you, it's very important that there are various examples for those of you who've read the big book. If you haven't, then you'll just have to take my word for it. There are various example alcoholics in the early chapters. One is called Jim, one is called Fred. And these are contrasted with some, their people, Jim and Fred, the examples, are examples of people that relapsed. And they narrate what happened. And then it gives an example of an AA member who, despite very great strains, internal and external, didn't relapse. Namely, one of AA's co-founders, Bill Wilson. And something only very recently occurred to me. When you look at Jim's story, page 35 of the big book, and Fred's story, 39, their narratives are very innocuous. But if you look at what their thoughts and concerns are, they are both entirely self-centered, not mean-spirited, not evil people, not even particularly, not selfish in a way which necessarily impacts other people, but concerned with themselves. Every thought is about themselves. Every one. Bill, page 15 of the big book, and later on in chapter 11, when he's famously pacing the lobby in the Mayflower Hotel, where he's had some difficulties in Akron. He's down to his last dollar. And is he going to drink, or is he going to do something to stay sober? On both of those occasions, in both of those situations, he thinks of others. He thinks if he gets drunk, he won't be able to help those other people, and what will happen to them? His concern is for the welfare of other people. He's still very self-centered, but his motivational system involves being part of a greater whole, being concerned for the welfare of others. And he stays sober. And the second thing I said that I have to do once I stay in AA, and the reason why I'm connected to lots of people, I've had occasional thoughts of drinking over the years, and every single time I've thought, what impact would that have on all of these people in my life? And I couldn't do it. I could not drink. And it's because of the connections. The second thing I said that had to be done was to do what AA suggests, which is the AA program. And the AA program is the 12 steps. And there are two ways of doing them. One can do the first 9 steps once. That's it, just once, and then practice steps 10, 11, and 12 for the rest of one's life. And the other approach, broadly speaking, is to take all of the steps repeatedly. I've tried both approaches in both cases for many years, more than a decade in both cases, because I've been here for a long time. And I have to report the results are in. And the results are, when I practice all 12 steps on a regular basis, my life is 1,000 times better than when I simply try to coast in 10, 11, and 12 and do not revisit the first 9 steps. Not only is it better, but other compulsions and addictions don't crop up. My mental health difficulties from many years ago have gone, all of them. I don't get into trouble in the way that I used to. I seem to be I've sailed through a lot the last few years, and it is not on my merit. It is on my continually observed incapacity to be in charge of my life. And it is that insight that comes from the first 9 steps. The last 3 steps can become very self-satisfied. You look at the first 9 steps, no more self-satisfaction there. And it is that which drives me back towards God, even when I don't think I need it. Those first 9 steps catch me unawares. And I have not had a problem in 31 years that has not yielded surprisingly rapidly to the first 9 steps when I finally get round to applying them. I'll do anything to avoid applying them. I'm getting better at doing it promptly and regularly. There's a line in the 12 and 12, the only people that scoff at prayer are those that haven't tried it enough. It's very provocative. And I think it's the same about doing the steps on a regular basis. The only people that scoff at it are the ones that haven't tried it enough. That's all I have. Thank you very much for listening.